Good afternoon. Let's see, let's go back a little bit and tell you why I'm here, because I was invited. Keep this in mind now. I was born March the 31st, 1919. Do your arithmetic and you come up with a pretty ripe old age. I forget things. Sometimes the history dovetail, and sometimes I'm not sure I dreamed this or did it actually happen. So bear with me. I'm going to do the best I can. What more can I say? First of all, I got to be a Tuskegee Airman strictly by accident. I didn't plan it. I'm not sure I've ever planned anything in my life. It just happened. Let's go back now to probably 1939. Congress passed a law that said that all males between the ages of 18 and 45 register. That means everybody had to go. And then they had a classification, and they had a lot of parameters to use classification. If you in 1A, that means you were ready to be called to go in service. And you got all the way down to 4F. The 4F guy might have been somebody who just had one leg. It's just a cursory thing. But anyway, if you're 1A, that means that you didn't have anybody depending on you. They could send you off, and nobody had to depend on you. You didn't have a mother or father or somebody else that depended on your being present. So if you got in 1A, you were right for it. Now, at that time, let me remind you a little history. We were a legally and rigidly segregated society. As an African American, I could only do two things. I could get in the Navy and wait on the white sailors. Or I could be in the black gang. That's not the color. I could be shoveling coal into those destroyers and battleships or whatever they had. So my brother and I decided that we wanted to go in the Navy, see the world, and get paid for it. But we got rejected. And one Friday afternoon, I was in school trying to get a degree. I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to be somebody's science and math teacher. I was in school, and Sergeant Mays came by one Friday afternoon and said the US Army Col is opening up training for blacks, African Americans. Okay, whatever. That Monday morning, I was down there volunteering. I found out that growing up in, abject poverty, there never was enough money. And I found out that the military paid you once a month. And boy, that Monday morning I was down there. I'm looking for this. It's funny how you can be motivated by money or the lack of money. The lack of money motivated me. Now, here I am, standing up here in front of these people talking about something I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm going to open this up to questions here. Okay? Any questions anybody want to ask me about anything? How long was your training? I think it's about 8.5 months. I was sent to Rantoul, Illinois, Chanute Army Air Force Base. And I don't know how, once you get in the service, they give you all kind of tests. And for some reason, I was classified as an aircraft armorer. That means I take care of all the guns and all the ammunition on planes, any type of plane they had, supposedly. I wasn't that good at it, but anyway, I got a certificate saying that I was qualified anyway. And from then on, I drifted from here and there, and I came up on a pretty good formula there. I take some pills, 1 in the morning, 2 at night, and I try to eat right. I go to Miss Winters, Captain D's, McDonald's, and every once in a while I cook for myself. And every Sunday morning I'm going to get up and go to somebody's church. And that formula has worked for me, and I'm going to stick with it. Thank you. got next.
Okay. I guess I'll sit. Can you hear me if I speak through this now? Okay. Some of my story is, of course, the same as Hiram's. I was born in 1929, however, and I kind of got an early start when it came to military service. 1939 was a significant year in all of our lives, and as I look around, some of you are a little bit young for that time, but for those of you who are a little bit older, you may recall that 1939 Hitler invaded Poland. It had already taken France, Czechoslovakia, Romania, Austria, and a series of other countries in the East Coast, in Eastern Europe, and had already was bombing the heck out of England, and I think was ready to challenge Russia, although they didn't know it at that time. 1939, the Congress passed Public Law 18, which authorized training for American men in college to receive training in the civilian pilot training program. This was an attempt on the part of the Roosevelt administration to develop mobilization to prepare for war, because in 1939 we knew that we were going. Also, the Lend-Lease program, England had lost most of its equipment and was relying on the United States to provide the wherewithal for them to save their country. They were being blitzed into nothing, and in the meantime, part of our policy was to remain neutral, not to be involved in it. But as 1940 rolled around, in 1941, of course, we were engaged with the Japanese, and we were fully engaged in the war in Europe as well. During that time, of course, in 1940, we had a new administration running, and President Roosevelt was being challenged by a Republican named Wendell Willkie, who really gave him a run for his money. And the black vote suddenly became important, although we didn't have that many people registered relative to today. We had all the votes were counted in those days, and Roosevelt offered a program. He eventually agreed to support training of African Americans in the Army Air Corps. Prior to that time, General Henry Hap Arnold was the commanding general for the Army Air Corps, and he had made it known that his policy was that there would never be any black people flying airplanes in his Army Air Corps. So we might as well forget it. He said you can train them if you want to, but they'll never be used. That policy persisted even after the war started, and even after the administration got behind the program and authorized us to have one squadron, the 99th Pursuit Squadron. And we were authorized to train people at Tuskegee, which was the only military training place for black pilots. Even beyond that policy continued to persist, even though it was sort of unwritten, because at that time we had the Fair Employment Act that passed, and ostensibly we would have equal opportunity to participate in the armed forces as well as in defense jobs. But even after we got started, the first 450 of the pilots who graduated from Tuskegee, who were deployed overseas, they were deployed to North Africa, and where they participated in strafing missions and taking out radar sites In fact, on one occasion, one of our guys, first lieutenant at that time, in his P-47 took out a destroyer with just his machine gun. That was relatively unheard of, but it happened. But we went on until 1943. It was 1943 before one of the congressmen, one of the senators, sorry, I don't call names and I don't remember them all that well. I do remember this one, but I won't say it. He said that all those black guys are doing over there is strafing missions, and if that's all they can do, we really don't need them. So we ought to bring them home. We ought to bring them back home where they belong, and let the white guys get on with winning the war. Well, at that time, our commanding officer was a West Point graduate, Benjamin O. Davis Jr., and I think he graduated in the top 30 of his class. It's a guy who went through West Point, spent 4 years there in training, and was never spoken to outside of the line of duty, line of business, something to do with his classes and so on. In fact, one event that illustrated the kind of discrimination that he experienced was all of the cadets had to learn to dance, and they would have to learn how to do certain kinds of dances. I guess just basic stuff for socializing, and those guys who did not have a mate, a woman to dance with them, they danced with each other, except for Benjamin O. Davis Jr. And who do you think Benjamin O. Davis Jr. danced with? Give you a guess. He danced by himself. And during those meals, when the not upperclassmen, but the younger guys would have to go through the dining hall and ask for permission to be seated at the table before they could eat. So many times Benjamin O. Davis Jr. didn't get a place, didn't have a meal because he was never given permission to sit at a table. So, and it was not like he could go to McDonald's and walk around and have a hot dog or something. He had to actually be seated at a table with the other members of a group and participate in the meal that way. And if he didn't get permission to sit, he didn't have a meal. And that went on for 4 years. Well, the type of character that this experience developed was a guy who had pretty much an iron discipline. When he came out of West Point, he was straight as an arrow. If you could see a picture of him, Benjamin O. Davis Jr. is a guy throughout his military career was like a stick. I mean, this guy was almost like he was rigid in his appearance and his demeanor. He's an excellent pilot, an excellent leader, but who had very strict demands on his troops. And he was a guy who knew everybody. He not only knew his officer corps, he knew his enlisted people. He used to drive across the base in his staff car. I can vouch for one experience. One time I was walking to sick call, and there was another airman who was walking across the street on the other side, apparently going in the same direction. I don't know if he was going to the hospital or dispensary or not, but we were both walking in the same direction. And David stopped his staff car and told me to come over here. He said, "You get that airman over here, and I want to see you walking in step to the dispensary." And there was no conversation, just yes sir, salute, and get that guy lined up over there, and we marched in step. that was the kind of an example of the kind of discipline that he required. Another time when we finally got a chance to fly escort missions for the bombers, B-17s and B-24s. I heard this sort of third hand, but by way of explaining why we didn't lose any of our bombers to the Luftwaffe, who were known to be great fighter pilots and good equipment and so on, was the fact that Davis had admonished the American pilots who were going out. He said, if you lose one of those bombers, don't come back. and they took him at his word. That's one explanation of why the American pilots did so well there. We had, throughout that campaign, though, 1943 to 1945, I think we flew 15,500 and some odd sorties, and 1,578 missions in that time. 200 of those missions were for escorting the B-24s and B-17s for the 12th and 15th Air Forces. And the point that I wanted to get to was during that 2-year period, in order to fly that many sorties, that was almost like hitting the ground, refueling, and taking off again. Then another point about that, most of these guys at that time were probably 18 to 24 years old. It was a very young cadre of military people. Also, I think B.O. Davis Jr. was our first officer, first black officer, and he had to rely on the pilots who were graduating from the different classes at Tuskegee to develop his officer corps. So he had an incredible job in preparing the black officers, as well as preparing them to fly combat missions, and also to maintain a kind of a character that was acceptable, not so much to the Army Air Corps, but acceptable to Benjamin O. Davis Jr. His standards were twice as severe as the Army Air Corps or any other branch of the service, and the kind of troops that he turned out were a reflection of that attitude and that character. So throughout that campaign in 1943 to 1945, one other statistic that's outstanding was that we lost 66 pilots during that period. We don't have any way of knowing how many enlisted men, how many of the ground support people were lost, but we do know we lost 66 pilots, and we had 32 prisoners of war were taken. There are a number of other statistical things. Some I can remember. Most I can't. I think, like Hiram, I don't recall all of it. In fact, sometimes I can wake up and I can still smell the fumes from those reciprocating engines for the P-47s and the P-51s and the other aircraft that we had. So some of what I remember, I do have to kind of sort it out sometimes. Last month, I was invited to speak to Cessna Aviation down in Columbus, Georgia, and they reported to their headquarters in Kansas, and Kansas instructed them to invite me to come to Kansas. And that sort of brought back some old memories because of earlier times when I had been at Chanute Field and out in the Midwest, Chanute and Scott Air Force Base on several different occasions. Any case, that's sort of 25 words or less. That's where I come from. I grew up in Chicago until I was 15. When I was 13, I tried to enlist in the Merchant Marines. One of the older guys, one of my older buddies, managed to enlist in there, and he said it was great, so I tried to follow him. Didn't make it. The next year, I was 14, I tried the Navy and the Marine Corps, and they said, come back later. When I was 15, the next year, I had, with another buddy, we really weren't serious, but we stopped by this Army place, and as it turned out, I think maybe the recruiter didn't have his quota, so we wound up being processed from just walking in to being on the back of a 6x6 on the way to Fort Sheridan, Illinois. So anyway, that's 35 words or less. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
How close does the movie depict actuality the movie Tuskegee Airmen?
Well, if you had a really broad perspective on it, they really tried hard to tell the story. But what they did with some of the characters in the movie, they consolidated. They took the first name of one guy and the last name of another guy and created composite stories. And they tried to tell the story about the kind of experience that we had in the segregated military. But of course, they sanitized the hell out of it. It was by the time they cleaned it up, that's what you saw. The real story, it was ugly. And in fact, in my recollections, America was not a beautiful place for us in those days. It was harsh. It was harsh. It was unnecessary. It was mean, and we were very fortunate. With the help of God, we got through it. And fortunately, we had good leadership and a lot of tenacity, and people who said that we demanded that this was our country as well. When people were telling us this is not your country, we had to persist in face of that. And I think we've done good overall.
What about the equipment that you had, the planes and all? Was it the same as the others had?
We started off with, we had PT-17s. In fact, I have some models in my car. I started to bring them up. We started off with the PT-17s, and then we got AT-6s and so on for training. Our first combat plane was a P-40. And I understand that those are sort of hand-me-downs from the Flying Tigers. And then later on we got new ones, we got new P-40s, and then we got for a while we had some P-47s, great airplanes. And then we had, for a very short time, we had P-39s. And we took those away and gave those to Russia. And eventually they gave us a P-51. And that was for the escort duty that we got with the 15th Air Force and 12th Air Force. So we started off with sort of hand-me-downs, but we wound up with the best fighter plane in World War II, which was the P-51.
Still flying.
Sorry?
A lot of them are still flying.
Oh, yeah, well, not as many as we'd like.
Yeah. It's to be desired.
How long did it take you to learn the block?
Sorry?
How long did it take you to learn to fly?
Most of us, and I include myself in the story, because it's too much to explain individually. But the introduction to aviation was part of that civilian pilot training program that began in 1939, and that was done on the college campuses. At that time, that public law authorized, I believe it was 100 schools to teach flying to young Americans. Out of that 100 schools, there were 6 black schools that were selected, and Tuskegee was one of the 6. We had basic, primary, and advanced training. I think all in all, I guess, about 9 months. 9 months, and depending on what other crew positions other than pilot, that was an additional training time.
What did you do once you came back to the States? When did you stay in the service?
A lot of us did. My assignment was with the crew test wing down at Eglin. Even with the Tuskegee Airmen, we used to go to Eglin to the auxiliary fields, gunnery and other missions, training there. I went back to Eglin, and that's where you asked me about my experience in flying, in flight status. There, I was assigned first to a DC-3, or a Booney Bird, and then everything else that I could get on at the time, I got on it. My most interesting experience in flying myself was in 1950. I was along with several hundred other guys. We thought that we were on our way to Korea, but when we got to Fort Ord, we wound up being assigned to a special section. We were assigned to a special task force. It was with the Navy and the Marine Corps, and on this task force, instead of going to Korea, we wound up going to the Marshall Islands, and we were there to test an atomic weapon, a hydrogen bomb, actually. And that was a different kind. That was the most interesting experience that I had, because flying with these Marines in there, they were flying something called a P-2V, which was similar to our A-26, only it was bigger. It had bigger engines. It had 10 times the vibration, and the wings flapped. Visibly, you could look out and you see the wings flapping. And these guys were looking for submarines, and we were right down on the deck. And what made this really an exciting experience for me is I was watching the pilot fish that were followed by schools of sharks. And you could see these pilot fish, as they swam through the water, they would every time they turned, it was like the light would catch them, and you see these flickers of light. And right behind them, these sharks, and here we are in this airplane with the wings flapping right down on top of it. That was pretty scary stuff. But they, for these guys, they did it all the time. It's just business as usual for them.
Better deal with Korea.
Oh yeah, yeah, by a long shot. I did eventually go to Korea after that.
Any other questions that anyone has? What do you end up doing for a career then after the service?
Well, actually, I spent a total of 13 years overseas, and in 1966, I left England and came back. No, 1958. 1958, I left Korea, came to Vandenberg, and there I was switched from flying to missiles. I was assigned to the 395th ICBM, it's a Titan I missile squadron, and I stayed with them until 1960. And I went to England where they were reflexing B-47s out of Upper Hager, in and out of Upper Hager. And I stayed there for 5 years as SAC was withdrawing its members and their B-47s back to the States. I think they were shutting down B-47s at that time. But I got in the middle of the struggle between SAC and USA in Germany. Both of them were saying that I belonged to them, and I lived out of a suitcase for about 6 months until headquarters USAC settled it and said I wouldn't go to either one of them. And they sent me to ADC, Air Defense Command, with another missile unit. So then shortly after that, I retired, and I was offered a fellowship to Syracuse University to finish my doctorate. And seems like I spent all my life going to night school. That was the first chance that I got to go to day school was at Syracuse. So.
What's a typical day like for you now? What's your typical day?
A typical day, if I look at my calendar, I think I would probably average about 4 days out of a week doing something with the Tuskegee Airmen, making a presentation, organizing kids, trying to raise money. And I'm going to ask you guys if you know somebody who knows somebody, we need some money for next year to get our kids into the cockpit after they complete their ACE training. We need to get them into the, what do they call it, Hiram, with the, Charlie Brown. The discovery flight.
Yeah.
To get them into the discovery flight. I think there are 4 ACE camps in this metro area, including ours. And we don't charge anything to our kids, so we have to raise the money for them to get, for everything actually, but to get them into the this Explorer flight. I think that costs us $75 for each kid, which is a bargain, although it's going up next year. We need to get 20 kids in the cockpit for that program. I travel a great deal to different places. Wherever I'm asked to come on behalf of the Tuskegee Airmen, I try and manage that, as do most of us. And our squadron now, I think we're down to, I think there are 5 other guys, and Hiram and myself. So we cover a lot of territory. So, for some reason, people want to see the OTAs who are still here and hear what we have to say about it. And we try and tell you what we think about it. So,
how difficult would it be for you to fly one of these planes now? Assuming we just passed you.
You mean one of the jets out here today?
Yeah.
Oh boy. Well, I'd have to go obviously back to computer school and learn. But last year out here, I think somebody had a G5 out here, and one of our guys had been checked out on a G2, and the rest of us, we got a chance to look at the cockpit. When I was out at Cessna, I got a chance to look at their equipment. It would be impossible to go out and fly one of these without training. So, in fact, a lot of the airline pilots, when we go on, they treat us kind of nice, and they thank us for sort of opening the door for them, and then they invite us to take a look at the cockpit, and they say they wish that they could fly the B-25s and the Goody Birds and those old reciprocating engine airplanes that we flew. It's entirely a different life. I think given the opportunity to get checked out in one, I think we'd all be there. We'd be there in a heartbeat. So, love to try it.
When was the last time that you did fly?
The last time was about 5 years ago, down in Texas, with some of the guys who were flying the tankers. I forget what they call them now, the big ones. They let us, get checked out, and they checked us out at the cockpit on just kind of a routine mission. Some of us got a chance to operate the boom. That was fun. trying to refuel an F-16. Well, that's a real dance.
Well, thank you very much again. I thank you so much to Tuskegee Airmen for taking the time to share history with us and for everything.